Strength and conditioning for hybrid fitness. Chicago world champs on the horizon. The Pilates Hybrid Athlete. Hello and welcome back to On the Rocks podcast. If you are a returning listener, and welcome to anyone who is new listening here. I am Coach Marshy and I'd like to welcome you to today's show. So with the hybrid industry and the HYROX industry continuing to grow at a rapid rate, we're going to bring in a guest today to cover it all and talk about various parts of training, competing, and what it is to be a hybrid athlete and coach. So welcome to today's show. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you. How are you?
Yes, very well. Thanks. Very good. So, let's just take one of those things from that little intro before we actually introduce you. Talk about the growth of hybrid fitness and how it's just taken the world by storm. From your perspective, what's happening?
Yeah, it's crazy, really. I mean, I've personally only been involved in more of the hybrid space for literally since September last year, so quite new to it. But I've been, my background's in elite sport and 400-meter hurdles and running. So for me, it's crazy because I've always been very tunnel vision on running, sprinting, and then when I was sort of thinking about kind of ending my career there, I was looking at my next sort of thing to get involved in, and I really had no intention of going crazy high level or anything. I just wanted something to get fit, tick me over and just enjoy, training like normal people and whatever. And there was just so much about HYROX and hybrid and stuff. I was like, oh, well, I'll give that a try. And yeah, I was spoiled for choice with all the classes and stuff. And then eventually just found one for me, and I'm now completely addicted to it. But yeah, I just can't get over how it's exploded, basically. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, we're going to go back to that word "addicted" to it in a minute, because that's really interesting that you've brought that up. You've given us a little insight there, and that's really interesting about your background in sport. But sort of within the sporting world and within sort of your career and life, what is your kind of background? Who are you? Where you from? What do you do day to day?
Yeah. So I'm Alex, obviously. I am from Essex originally. I now live in South London. My background sporting wise has been in athletics. So I've done 400-meter hurdles, 400 meters since, good 15 years basically. And I kind of tied that up last year. I loved it. I had a really good time competing that kind of England international level and just getting involved with teams and stuff like that. It was the best. I literally loved the sport so much. It's one of those that when you kind of, I think when you've reached your kind of capacity or potential at it, there's parts of me that I was like, oh, still a bit here, still a bit there. But yeah, it was fractions of seconds coming by the end. So I was like, okay, I think my time is sort of done here and getting a bit older. As I said, I didn't anywhere near expect to go and then find another sport to compete at so high level. But that is just my personality. As we said, being a bit addictive and just giving everything 100% is quite in my nature. And I'm also a Pilates instructor. So my day-to-day role is currently on the Courtney Black app. I coach Pilates on there, and I also do some online coaching as well, and just Pilates classes face-to-face. And just a generic fitness and running coach as well. So my guys that I train at, the Drop Fitness, I coach a run club there, and also I'm going to be starting coaching more HYROX classes there as well. So yeah, busy, but all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much there as a sort of personal interest to me in terms of a fitness coach and fitness background and sports science that we could unpack this all day. So we'll make sure we get the good bits in there. But just give us a little bit of insight. When you look at the 400-meter hurdles, someone like me, quite naive to that, did it at school, had a little go, but really naive to it. It looks like it's really demanding on the body as well.
Yeah, it is, to be honest. And we always say in track, you have an age and then you have your hurdle age. So if you've been hurdling for 10 years longer than someone else, you can really feel it. And I think like just running 400 meters, if you've ever done it, is horrendous in itself, but then adding in the hurdles, bias from my side, I actually preferred it because it gave your like brain and mind something to think about. Like you have to think about your steps in between the hurdles and stuff like that. So it's less about, wow, I'm in pain, and more, okay, I need to get this right sort of thing. But yeah, they're both very, very hard, very demanding events. And the fact that you're kind of like running, well, my PB was just under a minute. So, you know, you travel all around the world for a minute is kind of crazy. It's like crazy on your body, but also your mind. Like you have to get it right in that 1 minute. And that's what, well, I'm making that adjustment now to HYROX, where I have to really lock in and concentrate for an hour or so. I'm used to doing it for a minute. So yeah, that's been like crazy for me to get my head around. The mental side of things is very different. But physically, yeah, very demanding in a different way. So like the volume is obviously a lot less than what I'm doing now in terms of like running and stuff, but it was more the like power and intensity. Like every session was like 100%, or, you know, you'd have to really take long recovery and go for it. So the injuries and little niggles were a bit more common, just because, especially as I got older, like I found it really hard to recover to the next day. You know, when you're a kid, you just bounce back and do it again. But like as you get a bit older, you got to really prioritize the recovery and stuff like that. So yeah, super demanding. I'd say more so than what I'm doing now, but in a very different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, loads. And actually, there's so much there that we could discuss. And there's going to be elements of your past sporting career then that you can really use to your advantage coming into this like more endurance space. And I don't necessarily mean like the power is going to be great and like you'll understand plyometric training really well. And so you'll be able to work well in that. But also, like if I took a new client, say, to a track session, we'd spend the first 5 sessions getting used to like being on a track, for example, 100%. To do their intervals. Whereas you're going to be able to go into those sorts of training sessions straight in as an athlete, but also as a coach, you'll have like tips compared to say someone like me who doesn't know that much about track training. You'll be able to like use that to your advantage as well. So do you feel there's going to be like some things that can really help you both in your athletic and coaching journey from your past sort of sporting career?
Yeah, definitely. I think like, because I always say I'm new to HYROX, which I am, but I'm like no stranger to kind of elite sport and that environment. And I think that is just such a big thing that people kind of don't really get, how like the mental side of things and the preparation, even silly things like warming up for a race and that, like I've had that down for years. So stuff like that, I'm new, but I'm not new. I don't want to be, you know, sort of a fraud to be like, oh, I'm just brand new to HYROX and I've done quite well. Like I've been doing this a long time and I've had to learn it all from there, but it's just like translating it to a different environment. But I have found that really helpful, to be honest. Like I think the running side of things is mad to me, because I was saying this to some of the guys that I used to train with, like how just we're very, like we just run and we're naturally, you know, we can do these drills and they're just like second nature to us. It's like brushing your teeth. Like I'll do like the A skips and the B skips or whatever. I don't really comprehend how someone else might not have that ability to do that. And what I found as coaching is like how you know, that they're alien to it, which is completely fair enough. Like why would you bounce around a track like unless you've done it before? But also too, like how much just simple things, like I find that, you know, I don't even think about anymore, but how those little things can really help people. And like, it's not even just about, you know, once they've learned how to do those drills, their form's going to automatically improve and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, wow, like that's something I didn't even think about. But yeah, I found it eye-opening how, you know, just running on a track, to me, that just felt like normal thing to do. And then someone new, like, you know, my guys running in the run club have improved so much just by being, I think we've been on there like 3 months now. And honestly, I can't believe the improvements just by running on a track and being in that like team environment. It's just something I've always, I guess, took for granted. So that I've really found eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, no, it's really funny because we can't do it, can we? The AB skips, we just can't do them. We just cannot do it.
And like a natural. I didn't really realize until like you know, I've coached kids before and I've seen it a little bit, but even then they kind of just get it as well, because you know, kids adapt a little bit easier to it. But when you're an adult and you've never done anything like that, it's really about breaking down. That's actually quite a hard thing to do, and like breaking down all the steps. And I think, once it clicks, honestly, it's amazing. But it's one of those things that it takes a little while for sure. It's the rhythm.
It's really funny because in Nice World Championships last year, watching, I went and positioned myself just in this random place where I thought I could see. Mm-hmm. And I realized very quickly it was like where the warm-up area was.
Okay, yeah.
And the elites used the same warm-up area for the Elite 15 race. And what was really interesting in the women's race is that Meg Jacobi was the only one doing those types of warm-ups.
Really?
Yeah. But obviously her background is massive, like track background, right?
Yeah, I always say, like, when you go to a HYROX meet or an event or anything like that, you can just pick out a track person like all day long, because it's like we just do things a bit differently. I mean, I guess a lot of people might have come down from like 5Ks, 1500s or whatever. But as a sprinter, I always feel quite like alien in the warm up, because my background, like I'll do a jog or whatever, but then I'll start by doing strides and I just like run if I'm outside, indoors, whatever, and I'll do 8 to 10 like build up strides, and everyone's like, oh, what's she doing? Like everyone's like jumping on the machines, and I'm doing like A skips, B skips, the hamstring stuff. But I think if you know like what works for your body, I know that's what makes mine, get all like bouncy and ready for the kind of there's bits and bobs that I'll change now from my hurdle warm up, obviously, but it's pretty similar, to be honest. And like I've just kept that. That's another thing that I've just kept pretty constant throughout, like even just like a race day routine. When I hurdled, I used to like write down everything on my notes from wake up at this time, warm up this time, do this, do that. I still do that. It's pretty much the same. There's obviously parts that differ, but I think that's another thing from just coming from that like track background, is just I'm very aware of what to do on the day and stuff, which I think if you are new to it, I remember still even walking into that London arena in November, I think it would have been my first one, and being like, whoa, like, get me out of here, I don't like it. But like, and that's like someone who's been around that sort of thing before. But I think if you are brand new and you're just thrown into like a HYROX, like having stuff like knowing your warm up, knowing when to eat, knowing this and that is so important. I don't think that probably gets touched on enough until you're there and you have to deal with it. So that's something I guess like I've learned before and was able to take over, but it's definitely something I still need to work on as well.
Yeah, and sort of the last kind of question around this, or thoughts that I've got from what you're saying, is in terms of your past career. Like I've been in a privileged position where I've sat in multiple seminars around the world, even here at my own gym, with Elite 15 athletes, or had exposure to those guys. And there's a common theme that you're fitting into here, is a high level of elite athlete in something else before they came into HYROX, which clearly is transpiring into this, or like sort of being put across in this new sport, and has created a high level outcome. And it's not that you've just come bursting onto the scene in HYROX and you can do HYROX really well. What people perhaps miss, or they don't see the common trends that we can perhaps see, is that there seems to be this common trend that high performing HYROXers were very good at something else as well beforehand. Would you agree with that? Because you fit that massively.
Yeah, honestly, I think like, as I said, my race is very different. I used to race for a minute, now it's an hour plus. And I think, so in terms of the actual physicalities of the race, like there is parts that obviously have really helped. Like my running background is massive in HYROX, but I would say the main, component that I've brought over that people might not have ever experienced, or just they've not done it, is the like just mental preparation for the race, the organizing of the race itself, the tapering, the stuff that isn't just the actual performance on that day. I think it goes completely unnoticed, I think, even from people who have done it, doing HYROX for years but haven't come from that background. I think there's a real trick if you can nail that kind of routine and everything on the day, it becomes a much easier experience.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think on that as well, what I'm seeing, and when I watch a lot of people. I like to watch people. I like to analyze sport. I always have done, and I like to think about strategy and technicalities around how they got to that level. And what I can see is that like some of the pioneers outside the top level that were like very good open athletes, or just below Elite 15. Their age wouldn't suggest that it's time for them to trickle away, but they are trickling away, in my opinion. But I think that's because people like yourself are coming into the sport, and because of your previous high level in your sport, you're naturally coming in at those faster times than those people that perhaps pioneered the sport that hadn't had the background of something else. And I don't think it's a criticism of anyone or anything, but I just think it's something that I've noticed. I was at the Glasgow weekend for all 4 days with very little sort of representation from my gym guys. So I was really there as a podcaster and a fan of the sport. So you kind of look at a few people, you watch some races, people that you've met and know in the community, and you start to see these trends and these things, and you go, oh, who was that person there? And you find out about them, and you realize that they used to be like a 400-meter sprinter, or they used to be a 100-meter sprinter for like Spain or something like that. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. Like,
100%.
But it's also like your application as well. You understand a training week. Yes, not directly for HYROX necessarily, but you have probably lived off a training week for all of your known adult life and most of your childhood. So do you think that will give you an advantage as well? Is that you can now, as long as you can substitute in the right sorts of sessions and the right methodology.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of discipline, you've got it, right?
Yeah, I think discipline is always like a track, especially. I think, there's a lot of sports, team sports, whenever that you get involved in together, you do the training together and that. And we do that in track, but it eventually, at the end of the day, it's an individual race, and the discipline that we've had to learn from that has it's changed my life in a lot of ways. Like, I feel just even in my everyday working life, I'm like a different person because I've had that. I think that is something that really I've benefited from, just from being in that kind of elite track background. The people that I'm surrounded with as well, like I've always trained with people that are far better than me. We've got Olympians in my training group, all sorts. So, you see them doing it, you then get that belief that you can do it. And it's been exactly the same, to be honest, with my journey and transition into HYROX. Like, I've definitely had a head start. So I want to make that really clear. I haven't just like jumped on and done okay, but like I've come in and done pretty good for like my first race or whatever. And then other people in there have been like, wait, well, I can definitely do that. And it's a butterfly effect. I think that's just been like really key and really beneficial for me in my track background. I think, what you were saying before about the track, not even just track. I think track's probably the best example, but the track specialists coming over, I think, will just keep happening as well, because it ultimately, obviously there's things to learn and there's definitely things that we'll struggle with, but ultimately the running element of it, they're just going to have such a good head start for. I think if you're not quite done in your, I was done, I thought, in my track career, but not as an athlete of it, as I found out, it's a real great sport to get involved in, just because, you've got that chance to join everything up and use that running as your kind of key point.
So let's go into that bit. Let's dive into that, because you're talking, I think you're referring to Excel November 2024 as your first event. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about, you mentioned about when you came in and you were like, you got what everyone gets when you walk into that HYROX arena for the first time. You touched on that, but that was your first go. How did it go? What did you do? Did you just do open, or did you go straight into pro?
No, I did open. I actually went to my first ever HYROX class in the September, it would have been. So I literally wrapped up my track career in August. And, as well, we normally have a month off just to kind of recoup and whatever. And I got an itchy feet and I was like, I need to go to a class and do something. So off I went to the Drop in Sutton, which is now my like second home. I literally live there. But going back to your previous point about having a training plan and stuff, like that was like the best thing that could have happened to me there, because I linked up with my coaches now who understood that I needed a day, a plan. I'm a bit more rigid than your average maybe class goer at that point. I've always had a coach that's told me, right, on Monday you're doing this, on Tuesday you're doing that. Obviously there's flexibility, but I've just lived that way, and I'm still very much involved in my running coach because we work so well together. So I'll still be, going to her for advice on my running side of things. But anyway, we got ourselves ready in a couple of months for, my aim was actually for January. I think is it Manchester maybe? Yeah. And I was all right, I'm going to go for that one. That's going to be my goal. And then a ticket popped up for end of November, and it was like October, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. Like I'm still very new to all the other bits and bobs, and they were like, no, you've got to do it. You'll be fine. La la la. So off I went, and yeah, I think, as I said, I've been to like huge track meets, but it's a very different experience. I walked into that arena and I literally called my friend, like, I'm leaving. I can't do it. She was like, don't be so ridiculous. Like, take a breath, just get your space and you'll be fine. Because I think one thing that I really found from like HYROX events, and I'm now getting used to, and I can organize it a bit better. But at the time I walked in, when you walk into a track event, you walk in, you go and put your stuff somewhere, you sit down and base yourself there, and you're just in a little quiet place with your group. You just, mooch around, and then you start to think about warming up. This, I was like, everyone's just standing up and walking around. Like, am I meant to just walk around all day until my race? And I'd got there far too early, which was good in one way because I got to see the course and whatever. But then I was just feeling overwhelmed. I was just like, where do I go? What do I do? Anyway, eventually I found my coach, and she was like, just sit there for a minute, you're fine, just sit down. And like, I took myself away from the arena, sat down, and then, I got on with it like I would normally, and it was fine. But I think, from anyone doing their first one and that hasn't experienced before, I would definitely give myself longer to warm up next time. Like, I didn't really consider the fact that you'd have to walk 1,000 miles to go to the toilet, or, wait in line for a treadmill. It's all the silly things that I've never had to deal with before. So yeah, it was overwhelming, I would say. By the time I was on the start line, I was like, whoa, this is a lot. But I was very excited because I knew I was in good shape running wise. My stations this was very early on at this point, and still had things to work on, but I knew I was I had eyed up a couple of the girls, and I knew that it was a fast race. So basically I just went off with them, and yeah, it was a mad one. I was literally neck and neck with the girl in front of me the whole way. She was pretty much leading it the whole way. It was just a classic case of, I'd lead the run, she'd beat me on the station. I'd lead the run, she'd beat me on the station. It was just like back and forth, back and forth. And then, it got to the wall balls, and I literally was next to her, and I heard them calling out her number. It was like 31, mine was like 32. And it was just like that. And I just bossed it. And my sprint finish got me that. I literally won by a second.
Wow.
Crazy, like 1 second, which, it's a run through the line situation, which is one thing that I have been drilled into since I was about 11 years old, is run through the line. So that helped me on that occasion. But yeah, it was crazy. It was an open, and at the time I wasn't what I wanted or whatever, but I was not expecting to come away with a win and a world championship spot on my first race. So yeah, couldn't complain.
As a coach, and like some of my guys, like my mate Tatey and a few others, they would not expect this question from me. What was your time? I don't normally focus on time. I don't normally talk about things like that, but I'm intrigued. What was your time?
It was 1:05.56, I think, for the open. Yeah.
Welcome to HYROX, 1:05, first time. Look at that. That is
it was
great.
One of those, didn't have a clue what to expect. And one of my, like, the
so did you win the event?
I won. Well, I was first in my age group and second overall, because it was Sinead that broke the world record that day.
Sinead won, yeah.
I remember, like, she was in a wave couple behind me, like, so I didn't see her once on the course, but we were like refreshing the phone and whatnot, and then we saw, like, I think it was like 58 or whatever it was she did. I was like, what? That's insane. And but yeah, I still got first in my age, so I was very happy.
We've all seen what Sinead's done since then, including last weekend. So I get on well when I see Sinead. I don't know her very well, but we cross paths and we chat and say hello and stuff. So yeah, it's really good. Like, and it's a good story. Like, and it's good that you were in that race and saw that day, and we're at that event because you've now seen what she's gone on to do as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But sort of from your perspective, you say there you traveled all around the world for 1 minute, and you've done your first HYROX race, and then immediately been given the opportunity to travel around the world to go and take part in HYROX, because that, I'm assuming, qualified you straight into Chicago.
Yeah, it was really funny because I was on the Friday night, and they had more like waves on the Sunday, and I was pretty naive to it at this point. I was like, I wouldn't have won. Like, that's crazy. I just went off and enjoyed my weekend. Like, I think I had a friend's birthday. It was like all around Christmas. So yeah, loads of stuff going on. And then I was like, on the Sunday, I remember thinking, I'll just check the rankings to see like where I'm at. And this was Sunday morning, and they'd only just started, the girls. And then by half an hour later, I was there like refreshing every 5 minutes. I was like, she's back. Like, I just wanted to know. And luckily enough, I'm in London and I'm pretty close to it. So I was like, right, I had to just make a decision. I remember ringing my mum at like 4. I said, look, it's not finished yet, but I'm still in the lead. Like, should I just go? She was like, yeah, go. Like, what harm can you have in going? Because I wanted to get my flag. I was like, I'm desperate to have the flag. And luckily I had a friend racing around like 5-ish. So I knew if I hadn't, for whatever reason, got it, I could just be like, oh, I'm just watching her, so it's fine. But I was like really panicking. I don't love the way they do that, because you just had to wait around and then go back for my podium. But I'm really glad I went back for it, because yeah, it was like a really special moment for me. But it was a really stressful weekend trying to like work out whether I'd even got it. But yeah, I did, so that's good.
That's really interesting, because obviously that during that time, that competitor in you clearly came out again, and you kind of tried to not worry about it, and then all of a sudden you were in and you were doing what we all love to do. You press the refresh button on HYROX's website.
I didn't even know. I meant to say on that, like I went to get my flag or whatever it was, and then they said on the tannoy, oh, I'm qualified for World Championships. I was like, what? Did I? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I was so like, just went in and tried to enjoy it. I didn't even know that was a thing. So yeah, that was a really nice bonus.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's really cool. And what you said it was a really good moment, an important moment for you to get on that, when you stood on that podium and got your flag, and you wouldn't want to miss that now. Now you look back, it's like you wouldn't want to miss that moment. And I hear what you're saying, and I kind of agree with it, that people might now be going and competing on a Friday, and they might need to go home up north or a different country or whatever, and they miss out on that moment. And let's hope they get their flag still, and HYROX can have the decency to still send them out, because I think that's important. We've got a few flags in our gym, and that's kind of, it's always nice. It's just a nice moment for you athletes to have that kind of recognition of that hard work you put in. And on your first one as well, to get a flag, I've witnessed that in person as well with one of our girls. We literally turned up, and she's currently 3rd in the world as of last year's world champs, and it's kind of one of those moments where we wouldn't have wanted her to miss it. So your story really resonates with me, that it was important, and I'm glad you got that moment. And it's nice to hear a story that sort of, well, you were naive, you said, and then that happened, and that's really class. So I like that. That's cool. So sort of moving on to that then, World Championships, are you going?
Yeah, I was very kindly, my guys at the Drop Fitness, they did like a fundraiser for me, which was really helpful, because obviously Chicago is not close. It's very expensive and it's very far. So yeah, that was really helpful. Obviously, you've got to pay your entry and everything in HYROX. So it's, yeah, I am going, which I'm very fortunate to say I am. And I'm also going, I get to compete twice, because I qualified in doubles as well. So I'm really happy that my friend's coming with me too. So that's worked out really well.
So you compete on the Friday and the Sunday?
Yeah, so I get to do my solos first, which is good, and then the doubles on Sunday.
Yeah, one of ours that's going, she's in the same boat as you, where she qualified solo, and that was the goal. And she gets to do that race as like the A race, and then she's looking at the doubles as a bit of fun, but providing her partner makes it, they're possibly going to be world champs as well. So, because they had the world record until last weekend. So, I think it'll be interesting to watch and see, and we'll see you there. We're going to be there. We're going to be there doing on-site interviews as well.
Nice.
And catching up with people. So because you've now been on the show, we will definitely come and probably follow your race now and try and capture that. So that'll be really cool. In fact, we do go live a little bit. So we tend to go live with guests that we've had on as well. So people back home can try and tune in and watch a little bit as well. So we'll see. But obviously the time difference, we'll work that out and see how that works for us in the UK as well. But so world champs, obviously you're fairly new. You're still like under a year in this, but are you going to do anything differently in these remaining weeks up to Chicago, or are you just kind of keep learning the sport and keep growing?
Yeah, I think like for me, like the biggest thing was going from open to pro, which I did first of all in Glasgow, and then again in Malaga. So that was like my biggest, like, not worry, but a little bit of a concern. You know, I'm on the smaller side. My running is my kind of superpower. Everything else I definitely struggle with, or, you know, have had to work really super hard on. So that was my main, like, I want to get that out of the way. No, I can do it. You know, it didn't go amazingly well the first time, so I did it a second time, and that went a lot better. So I'm confident with my ability to actually do it. So that's one thing. And then I think, like, just as, you know, again, back to the track racing, like I'm used to kind of having a season where I race like week in, week out. So racing for me helps me kind of mentally prepare, I suppose. Like every race I find a bit easier. I find like things go a little bit better. Obviously there's off days, there always is, but yeah, so I think I'll still be racing, but I'm trying to balance, you know, not dropping the training intensity too much. I've had a really quick turnaround just now, got back from Barcelona the other day, and then I'm going to London. Obviously it's a little bit more of a fun run out for me in London, but I want to still give it my all and, you know, work on the stations that I can really make a difference on. So yeah, it's just balancing that training week has been interesting, and that's what I'm focusing on. Trying to get a bit more strength sessions in, just because obviously, you know, I rely on my running quite a lot, but I need to really build up the strength to be in the pros in Chicago. But in terms of the actual like training, not much is changing. We're adding like a real big couple of weeks now. I've got two more races coming up, London and Berlin, and then Cardiff as well. So yeah, I'm just balancing everything at the moment.
Yeah, do you know what? I love this. I don't like making assumptions, but I do make assumptions because I'm listening to what you're saying. It just sounds like you've just taken what you used to do in another sport and gone, we're into this now, and we're like going to approach it in the same way. And you know, you're putting those races in. You know, people, I still don't think people know the formula to HYROX. I think we're still early enough. People are starting to find it, and the secrets are kind of like out there, but I think we don't really know the formula. But in most other sports, like if it was a team sport, you'd have pre-season with some pre-season friendlies. In your sport, you know, I'm naive to it, but you'd have your races that are very much about you finding your positioning and track and all of that. And it looks like you put a lot in between now and Chicago, and some people would be like, oh, she's mad. Why is she doing that many races? Yeah. But in reality, you're not going there to win every single one of those races. You're going there to kind of tune up for world champs, right?
100%. Yeah, I use it as, I mean, again, in the hurdles, it was, you did have more to go wrong in a less space of time, I suppose. Like I'd use them to really fine tune, you know, it could be like the stride pattern, you're changing a few things here and there. You know, you've got British champs in, I don't know, let's call it July. So all the races in June are just to kind of really fire you up to get it perfect there. And I sort of see it in the same way. Obviously it's more taxing on the body, but I kind of use those races as training, like not necessarily tapering every time to go and perform at my very, very freshest and best. Like I'm in a middle of a massive training block right now, and I had to go to Barcelona and run open solos. But that for me was just about trying to get a little bit more speed here and there. And then it's just race practice. I think for HYROX especially, like I'm getting it now, but like the main thing for me was like, you know, just like silly things like getting the laps right. And that, I think it's like really key. Like you can do all that hard work and then just mess up on the day because you're not quite used to going in the right arch or whatever it may be. So I think race practice in HYROX for me is super important. Also my like mental focus, as I said, I'm literally used to, you know, training hard, racing easy. This for me is like training hard, racing harder. And it's just that hour lock-in mental focus that I've definitely got better at, but I struggle with that. I'm used to, you know, staying switched on for a minute and then I'm done. This is a full hour of, you know, got to keep going. You've got to tell yourself you're fine. You know, you've got to work out how many laps you're on, all this. So yeah, for me, I know loads of people will be, you know, completely done now and Chicago's their main focus. But yeah, for me, race practice is more important. Just everyone's different. That's how I respond well to it.
Really interesting. Something that I like to be really transparent with our listeners about is that I don't ever share the questions. So I don't ever really know. I know what I'm talking about, but you don't know. And what you just said there that's interesting because you are taking an approach that from a sports science background, which when I was really involved in that, this definitely didn't exist as an industry, hybrid sport, not like it does now.
No.
And I think that's the right approach. I believe in that approach. Convincing my guys at my gym is really difficult as well, and they'll be listening to this. And it's really hard to convince people that you can race and you don't have to be out there full send to try and win or get a PB. Yeah. It can be about other things. It can be about all the things you just listed there. Like you said, the hard work can be done, and then you run in the out arch or you run out of the in arch and you do a lesser lap, or you don't focus in on being engaged from lap 1. So therefore, did you run a lap, or have you got 2 to
really throw your whole race off? Yeah. And I also think, like, if you are, you know, it's different for like elite athletes who are, you know, that's part of their job to be able to manage this, right? But if you are, you know, on that cusp, which a lot of us are, we're not quite, you know, this isn't our jobs, we've got other things to do and we've got to balance a million things around. But if you're kind of at that level and then you're putting all that pressure on that one race in Chicago, for me personally, I think that's like a disaster waiting to happen. Like, you know, you're getting there, you've not done any race practice, you're just expecting everything to fall into place in that very one moment, which would be the fairy tale. And for some people, less, you know, it 100% happens, and that's brilliant. But I just think it minimizes risk. And look, I could be so wrong, could go out there and run out the out exit or whatever. But I think for me, I just know how my brain works. And I know the more I do something, the kind of more in tune with it I become. And it was exactly the same in my hurdles. Everyone used to laugh at me, like everyone would be setting PBs in May and mine would come in August. But it's just, you know, part of the parcel. Like, it's just how my body's been wired, I guess.
No, do you know what? This is like gold dust. It's a great perspective because you're coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, it's
with
different
that knowledge.
Yeah.
And it, again, no one knows whether that's right or wrong yet.
No, it's true.
And we're gonna find this out, and it'll be interesting. And you know, what I've tried to do with the podcast, this is, you know, we're building slowly. We're not an old podcast. We've only been going about a year and a bit.
Nice.
And I always like to follow on with our guests, like almost, you know, you guys will remember you've been on the show, I'm sure, but I like to continue to follow. We share on our story things of our guests and what's happened, and make little reels at events of them and say, you know, guest of the show, Alex, here she is at Glasgow or whatever, you know. And I think what will be really interesting is that you've given me something to kind of like look at from a sports science analysis point of view to see if your approach works, and it'll be interesting to know how you adapt as well if you decide to change or do something else. So that'll be really cool, and it'll be good to talk to you again like later on in this process, just to see what you see what you actually did and how it actually went for you. So on that note, obviously, you know, you mentioned that you were at Barcelona last week, and that's part of the process. And you use this for various sort of things, various station practice maybe as well. What do you think? And I don't know if you know the answer to this yet, but what do you think? What's the top level? What's the goal here? What is it that you would want to do if there was no restrictions on you here?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get to the highest point I can get. So an elite athlete, elite 15 would always, I'm not having any kind of things in my way to set that as my goal. Obviously, along the way, there's all sorts of things to consider to get that. You know, I'm not anywhere near it yet, but I think I will always aim for the highest point. Yeah, for me personally. And you know, with that comes faster times and whatnot. Obviously, both my PBs I would like to drastically lower. So yeah, I think aiming high, definitely.
No, I love that. Love that. People are not brave.
Yeah.
People aren't brave to say that. And you've got like a history in like you were saying about the discipline of it. And you said actually interestingly about your coach, and like that you've always had Mondays this, Thursdays that, you know, you've always had that kind of led approach and structure rather than maybe sort of your main class goer. And as a gym owner and a HYROX affiliate, there's obviously going to be like a financial business model that suits them to set this up as a group exercise thing. But let's be honest, me and you both know that at a certain point, you're going to have to step out of that. If you
Definitely.
really want to make strides, you're going to have to step out of that. You can still do it. It can be an integral part of your plan, but you're going to have to be off on the track doing your stuff. You're going to have to be doing your lifting sessions, your power sessions, the things that, to be honest, the new 365 program that HYROX have put in is a lot more focused on and is really good, for that.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that they've done that. But in reality, you know, we've got a lot of athletes coming in now at all sorts of levels from different places. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with CrossFit, but we've got a 7-time world champ coming into it now. You know, Tia Toomey, she's now in she's our sport. This is our sport, and she's now in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, all the different backgrounds, because it is so, I want to say, welcoming to like these kind of, and appealing to these sorts of athletes is where you're going to see all the big changes start to happen. I think track especially, I'm waiting for all the girls to, you know, when they've had enough of running in circles, going to come straight over, because it is the perfect element. You know, if you can get that endurance, obviously I'm talking like, you know, some of them might be running 400 and they don't want to go a meter over 400 meters in their lives, but the sort of 800-meter runners that are strong, that they're fast, they do weights, they do lift, they're just going to be, I think they'll be unbeatable, to be honest. But we'll see who comes over. But yeah, I think what you're saying is interesting about the gym goers and stuff. I think with HYROX, a lot of things I think online and just in general, like there's so much you can be doing and that people think they can be doing. And I think it's like, yeah, I think you have to kind of differentiate that elite level a little bit, or, you know, not everyone has to be doing 18 sessions or whatever a week, or it might be to, you know, they're still doing unbelievably well in that going to the class. And I think the only negative I see in that kind of hybrid space is that everyone thinks they have to be doing everything all the time. But I think for me, what works so well is having that plan written down. That's my plan. That's what I'm following. I'm not looking at anyone else. I'm just tunnel vision on my plan. Someone else might be running, you know, 100 more kilometers than me a week, but I've got my specialized thing written down. And that for me has been a game changer, because again, it's different at elite because they normally have someone to tell them to do that. It's more the people that are in that mid space of not quite elite, but, you know, they're doing it a bit more than just for fun. That's when it can get a little bit tricky on managing what you're doing every day. And yeah, I think if you can get something written down that's for you, that's my, you know, job for this week. This is a game changer personally.
Yeah, I love that. Do you know what? That is, anyone who's listening, that is, I mean, Alex has just given you it there. I love that, because you talked about that middle ground. You know, you'll be working with people for sure that are in that middle ground where it is the hobby, but they want to do it a bit better than that. But they're not going to be in the elite 15, and they might not even qualify for worlds, but they're not doing it as a participant.
Yeah.
And you've just said it there, and that you've given your kind of what works for you there, and, you know, write it down. This is mine, and this is my plan. And I think, you know, it's really interesting. I think it's a real golden nugget for you listeners out there to sort of go, do I need to think about this a little bit more? Do I need to go and talk to my gym owner, my coach at the gym? How can this work for me a little bit differently? And that's really cool. And it's nice to hear that from someone who's got a big history in training, because you can transfer that over into HYROX, but, you know, it's sometimes nice to just hear that perspective from someone who's kind of fresh and into the space, but knows a lot about training. And that's really cool. So yeah, you talk about lots of different things that you could do, you know, like, and that you said about 18 sessions a week for some people, and you don't necessarily have to be doing that. Let's talk about your Instagram name, because really something as simple as your Instagram name really stood out to me, because it made me go, I want to talk to Alex. Because the Pilates Hybrid Athlete. Now, you've explained that when you introduced yourself that you teach Pilates, and you're clearly now a hybrid athlete in HYROX. However, I feel that things like Pilates and strength and conditioning is still going to be being underlooked as a part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered what your kind of initial thoughts in this sort of first 6 months, a year that you're in this are around that from a coaching point of view, but also sort of as an athlete and someone who's been an athlete in another sport. You love Pilates, you must do because you coach it. Should it be an integral part of our training?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because when my background, like really for Pilates, where that kind of love came from is we had a physio back in my track group that we'd always go and see if we had any bits and pieces or whatever. And she was unbelievable as a physio, but she also taught Pilates, but it was very much like athlete specific Pilates. So it was all for like speed, power, that sort of thing. You know, it became an integral part of our plan every year in the kind of pre-season, if you like, in athletics, it's called like, you know, that pre-vibe. We'd do a couple of weeks of this building up, you know, it might be glutes, abs, whatever it may be. And then by the time we came to start the real work in October, we were sort of conditioned and channeled, ready to go. And yeah, as someone who's literal, you know, weekends depended on not being injured because I'd booked in here, there and everywhere, I just couldn't ever see why you wouldn't use it, to be honest. Like it, for me, just all my like imbalances were worked on and everything that I was struggling with, that just got better. Obviously there's still injuries that it's not going to solve. I'm not saying it's like a cure, but it just helps so much to channel your body to deal with that demand. I think, you know, again, I said the intensity is very different, but my training right now is still super intense. You know, the load that I put my body under. And I do believe it's because my kind of core and everything to do with it is so well tuned. You know, I always factor in Pilates into my week, that I get on a little bit better than someone who has a weaker, you know, core or whatever. I see it a lot at the gym. People, which I 100% get, they want to go and get like a crazy sweaty workout. They want, you know, bang for their buck or whatever. They want to say, I've done my workout today, I'm covered in sweat, brilliant, off we go. But, you know, that's where the lower back problems happen and the you know, Achilles and the tears and everything like that. Whereas if they'd kind of taken even just another session in their week to just slow it down and like include that kind of more core, you don't really need to call it, you know, Pilates. You can be core activation, whatever you want to call it. It's fundamentally, it is Pilates work. And I think, yeah, I personally think a lot of people in this space are put off by Pilates in general. Like, you know, I think when it's still a bit old fashioned when you think about, you know, that the kind of long, like low intensity sessions that are just like, you barely move off the mat sort of thing. My Pilates is very different. And like what I've learned is very different. It's very much like dynamic power Pilates suited for the sprinter or the hybrid athlete. You know, I'm doing it because I know what works for me to run my fastest, to lift my best, la la la. So then I'm translating that to others. And I think, I'm not saying, oh, when they try my workouts, but when they try that style of workout, they're like, okay, like that is a bit more harder or, you know, challenging than I thought it was going to be when I initially imagined and envisioned a Pilates class. So yeah, I've definitely seen there's not much space for it. I'm really trying to make sure that it is seen and heard on my platform just because I fully believe in it, obviously. And I just hope to see it get a bit more recognition and people use it more for their rehab. Not even that though, like just having like an extra day in their week dedicated to that might be more beneficial than running another hour, you know. I think it's just, I think once people try it, they understand, but it does take a little bit of persuasion.
And therefore, do you feel like it's underused?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great, the way you've kind of gone through it there is really important to like acknowledge that there's probably a lot of people that know this. They know, but they just don't make the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm humble enough to sit here and say I'm one of them for sure. Like, I 100% know that if I did what you just said, I would be a better athlete at HYROX. I know that.
Yeah, it's just because
I work in the industry.
Yeah, I think with like, because there is so much to fit in with your running and your ergs and your this and your weights. Like, I can understand why it is just like pushed to the backdrop and like pushed aside a bit. But it is one of those, like, if it was to be put in a little bit more of a priority, then, you know, you wouldn't need to spend so much time doing other bits or whatever, because you'd automatically get stronger from doing this. And then, you know, that 6 weeks that you've had to take out due to back pain or whatever might have been eliminated. So it swings and roundabouts, but I can see why, how it's hard to fit in for sure. But I would also argue that it's integral.
So both your athletic career and your working career now, you'll go, this is you, isn't it? This is going to be you, I think.
Yeah, that is me. Yeah. It's all linked in really nicely, and I'm really enjoying just the coaching side of things as well as, doing it myself. I think joining it all together is definitely me, 100%.
Yeah, no, do you feel excited about life?
So excited. Yeah. Like it's been a real turning point. I'd say even like this last month, I've just, when you just feel like everything's like clicking and going in a good direction. It's taken me a while. Like I've always kind of been like not really tapped into my coaching side of things. I've always had the qualifications and I've just been like either working for someone else or just like sitting along doing something different that I'm still interested in, but it's not my passion as such. And it wasn't really until I would say HYROX definitely opened this door for me, because it was starting that run club that I was like, wow, I love this. Like, this is like, I want to go and do it. And seeing them guys, like how much they improved and how much it impacted them was what really made me think, like, actually, this is what I want to do. And like the Pilates has always been, kind of behind a screen, really. Like I just teach on an app and it's, that's what I do. But I think having that element of now being more in person and more direct has opened up a whole new host of opportunities. So yeah, I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, it's great to hear as well, because across many sports, well, all sports really, people can have a sporting career and then life can kind of take a bad turn when they have to make that decision to kind of stop. And you've seamlessly transitioned into something else, and that's really cool to hear. And actually, perhaps will be inspiring for other people in your position to kind of look at that and go, well, why not? And you kind of hinted that might happen quite a lot anyway. You think from the track world, it could be a thing.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think track's an easy one to have, just because you can see the impact and the benefits quite quickly. I'd say, like, you could have been doing your kilometer reps on the road or on the grass or whatever and tracking them, and literally go to a track, do a couple of sessions and see it like drop like that. And I think people love that. Obviously I love that. I know when I improve, it's like, whoa, that's really good. So I think, seeing it on the track is one thing, but the Pilates thing, it's a slower process, but it's very rewarding also when people kind of trust that process. Especially we've done on the app, I did like a 30-day challenge, and I know that is a lot for people to commit to, especially when they're used to running around, jumping. HIIT is their thing, and that's completely fine. But they took a chance on doing those workouts and have still seen like an amazing response and got amazing results, just in a very different way. So that's why I think that's why I've found what I do, because I just love that response, and like knowing that it's helped someone is all I could ask for.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then you've met a former guest of the show recently, and mutual friend between us in Caitlin, from founder from the HYROX Queens. So just, you talked about community a little bit. You've touched on the HYROX community slightly and what it gives. And you've obviously met Caitlin and been to HYROX Queens events recently. So what do you think to the HYROX Queens, and where do you think it's going? Does it sound exciting, everything you've been involved in so far?
Yeah, I mean, I was just like stumbled upon it, to be honest. And I was so excited by the concept. I think like Caitlin describes it perfectly, but it can be quite a lonely space as an athlete. Like, especially, I'm again used to this sort of thing. I used to get sent off to hotels and have to share a room with someone that didn't speak your language to race, and that's that. You just get on with it. And we never had that in athletics. It was very much a lonely thing. You'd FaceTime your friend's family, boyfriend or whatever, but that would be it. You'd get sent off on your way. Whereas I think the fact that someone has thought about that and like, come to a solution with it rather than just spoke about it is incredible. I think, I met a lot of the girls last week at the event we did with Night, which was so unbelievably exciting. And just like everyone's on the same mission. Obviously we're all competing or whatever, but we all want to get better. We all want to get faster, but we don't need to be alone to do that. I think that's really key. And that's, again, from my background in athletics, one thing I would have loved more of is that community vibe. And I think, having that has been, well, it's been a lifesaver even just these last few weeks, knowing that you've got people to reach out to and other people dealing with a similar situation with you. It can be as simple as, you know, what time are you going to be at warm up? Can like we link up? You know, you might be on there. Some people are lucky enough to have their family watching, but if you're in the middle of nowhere, you might be by yourself, and it's just nice to link up with these girls who are also on that same mission, basically.
Yeah, no, it's quality, and I think, you know, Rocks Queens and the whole HYROX community and everything else. You know, I can go and spend a weekend in Glasgow with barely any of my team there, and actually still just be chatting all weekend and having cups of coffee and whatever with people, because you just met these people, and you might have absolutely nothing else in common, but
Yeah,
you've got like
yeah,
you've got HYROX in common. And I was talking to some other guys from another episode, and they were sort of saying that you could actually have nothing in common, but most of the time, because we're a little bit obsessed, and you said addicted to this, like, because we're a bit obsessed with HYROX, most situations I find myself in, I'm wondering how I can make the conversation go about HYROX.
100%. Yeah,
it's
like go to like a family event where no one does it, and you're just like, but I did HYROX. Did you know that? And then the whole conversation's about that. And it's nice to actually have people that do understand what you're talking about, rather than like, oh, explain what that is again and la la la. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, it's really cool, to the point where on Saturday, so when this is out, everything we've said in relation to London will have happened, but I am taking the floor with just a mate from my ordinary friendship group that doesn't participate in my gym or has just been a friend for years. And his only experience of HYROX is because he helped us out to make a film, was filming us through a lens. That's literally his experience of HYROX. So he does train in the gym, and he does a lot of running, so he'll be fine. But we're just out there for a bit of fun at Olympia, and it'll just be nice that going forward, him and our other friend who helped make the video and film from before, at least they know what this is now, and it gives me that. So, and I think, you know, you've touched on it there, just having those common interests of people and being able to chat about it and not have to explain it is always great. So that's really cool. Awesome, Alex. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. I think we have established that you and I could probably talk about a lot more in depth if we really wanted to. And we certainly will always look to welcome guests back on to catch up on their progress and where they're going. And, you know, for me, listening to your story and hearing where you're at, you know, all the best with those goals. And thanks for being so brave and saying what your goals are and believing in those, because it'll be great for us to kind of watch that unfold and see how you get on in Chicago as well. So, you know, good luck with those, and I hope they all go well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been really cool. So everyone who listened or watched, wherever it is you're getting your podcast, thanks so much. Please like, comment, subscribe, drop some comments on all the platforms. I'm sure Alex and I will have a little look through afterwards, and if you do ask any questions on there, we can always answer them, and I'll tag Alex in them as well if they're relevant for her, and she can always give you some feedback as well. Alex, if people want to follow this journey, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It is, as you mentioned before, it's @ahill_Pilates PT, and my tagline is the Pilates Hybrid Athlete. So hopefully you should find me.
And we'll drop that in the description on everything as well, so people can find you nice and easy as well. So from you, Alex, thanks for coming. From everyone who's listened or watched, thanks for coming to the show. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you all here again to talk more on the rocks.